Welcome back to the Zilosophy podcast. It is a rainy day here in Florida, so I am forced inside. Um, Aaron Swan, who's my guest, is all the way over in Hawaii. We had a little bit of technical difficulties throughout, so bear with it, but mostly the content is there and mostly it's great. But I don't want to start there. I want to start with this is an incredibly sad and solemn time in our country, the United States of America, and also in the world in general, with the pandemic and now the social injustice issue resurfacing all at the same time. It's incredibly difficult for everybody. So please let us start with being good to ourselves and being good to each other. I know that some of us are so frustrated that we think that when we see injustice, we have to react and push back. And certainly there are times and cases like that. The peaceful protests that are happening are quite inspiring. The looting and rioting is quite disgusting. I sit here stuck in the middle like most people, where I'm a white, well, kind of brown, but mostly white man. So, and I grew up in a pretty solid family in a pretty solid neighborhood and have lived a pretty fortunate life. And I don't know what it's like for other people that haven't had to deal with that. I've heard from some friends and listened to them over these past days, and heard some pretty horrific things, and then sort of recounted back to some of my experiences with some police officers here and there throughout my time. And I've certainly seen some jerks. I've certainly seen some systematic racism in places. But I think it's really important to also mention, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, I have many good friends who are police officers. I do believe that by far the vast majority of the police in this country and most countries are good people trying to do the right things. But I also realize it's not just as simple as saying there's a few bad apples. There are systemic problems that need to be dealt with. I hope that with the pandemic and this, it seems, and the social injustice, it seems to be dividing us more. Ultimately, I hope it's going to connect us more, because I can promise you something, guys. The answer is not pointing fingers at other people. The answer is each of us looking inward and seeing, what can I do to make a difference? That's why I started this. That's why I wrote this book. It was really just a letter to myself about the things that I wanted to work on to be the best person that I could be, so that I could make a difference in the world. Golf is a really trivial thing, but it can teach us a lot. That's why I chose that. And I just had an interaction with an old buddy of mine, Michael Kachko. Shout out to Michael. I sent a book to his son. And I said, look, you should read it too. You know, the thing is what I learned and what I wrote about is that being a better person can actually make you a better golfer. And for those with the sickness like me and Mike, that's a good way to trick yourself into being a better person. And that's why I wrote about that, and that's why I wrote that to myself, and that's why I work on the things in this book constantly. So I'm not really going to promote anything other than I mentioned the book. I do have a GoFundMe that supports this podcast. It also supports the videos that you've seen me make. It's on GoFundMe. It's called Free Zilosophy Content for Kids, Heroes, and Families. I will be looking at pivoting that even a little bit now that there's all these other things that have popped off in the country, and trying to provide a steady, calm, positive voice, unifying voice. Because I can promise you that if we keep saying those people are the problem and we should get rid of them, nothing will ever get better. If we start saying, maybe I'm the problem, maybe I can be better, maybe I should work on being my best, so that when other things happen that I don't like, I can lead by example. That's what I hope and wish for everybody. I hope everybody's staying safe and calm out there. This is a really hard time. Aaron Swan is a great guy. Oh, I need to tell that story real quick, and then I'll introduce him. We get into a lot of talking about personal growth, personal development. He's on a very similar path to what I am on. He's creating content that allows us to look inward and look at ourselves and try to do our best and bring our best to our community and then to our world. The way we met is pretty interesting. You guys may not know this, most people don't, but over the last 6 years, I've paid rent for a total of 6 months, and it was to Aaron Swan. I was helping my mother take care of my Nana, who was sick on hospice at the time. And being in that small house with that heavy stuff going on, I needed a break. So I found this ad, and it was a Craigslist ad, and it said $1,400 for a one-bedroom apartment on Beacon Hill, right at the top, right next to the State House, which, for those who know Boston, is literally the best block in Boston. And there was only $1,400 a month, and I had my own private bathroom. To which I thought, this is complete BS. This has to be a scam. But I talked to the guy, seemed normal, figured I'd go check it out. Turned out, as you'll hear, he came from a privileged life and has done very well. And he owned this place and was renting it very cheaply to people that he liked. And so I lived there for 6 months. But right when I moved in, he said, you know, he was a surfer, and I'm thinking about moving to Hawaii. I'm in my 30s. And I looked right at him. I had to look up because he's pretty tall. And I said, dude, what are you doing here? Get to Hawaii. So you're going to hear all about, he actually did that. And I was really glad he did that, because it also helped him dive deeper into doing community work with the Special Olympics, and then doing more work on himself and his own personal growth, and learning the benefits of meditation and the benefits of introspection and personal development and personal growth. So anyway, I think that's enough babbling for now. Coming up next, my conversation with Aaron Swan here on the Zilosophy podcast.
Maybe it's not too late. Maybe you could make my world a brighter place.
Well, here we are after a little delay. Some biblical rain on my end chased me inside, and in Florida, and a weed whacker on your end in Hawaii chased you back inside. So, like everybody else, even though we're in beautiful places, we're stuck inside today too. This is Aaron Swan. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, buddy. How's it going? Aloha.
Aloha, brother. Yeah, so it's not going great. You know, we were talking just a little bit off air, that this is a really weird, solemn, scary time in our country, in our world. And, you know, that's why I thought we had planned to do this before this real recent crazy stuff started erupting. But I thought the timing was perfect, because you and I are both guys who wow, there's some weird garbling there. You and I are both guys who have recently committed our lives to trying to do our best and bring our best to the world. And I think that more than anything else, we can get into all the different points of view and discussions, and I'm sure we will. But I hope ultimately, more than anything else, we can all agree that this is what we all need to do, is to try and bring our best to the world, and hope that everybody else does theirs, and eventually we'll all be okay.
Yes.
So glad to have you on today so that we can have that type of a discussion. So we'll pick up, as I said, I'm going to record the intro after, so they'll get the story of how we met. But basically, you had a place in Boston. I rented a room for you for 6 months, strongly encouraged you to get the heck out of there and move to Hawaii, because you're this big, giant surfer dude living on Beacon Hill. It never made any sense to me. And, you know, even though it personally wasn't a great thing for me, because I had to leave this awesome apartment, it was a great thing to be able to help you and give you a nudge to do that. And you've been in Hawaii now for 3 years, 4 years?
I'm about a little over 2.5 years. Yeah. So
Okay.
coming on 3
Coming up on
years.
3. So you moved out to Hawaii, not just to surf and be a clown. You actually decided that this was a time for you to, like, as you said just a minute ago, get out of the rat race. And I know you've dedicated a lot of your time in your life since then with the Special Olympics. So why don't we just start there?
Sure. Let me first thank you for having me on. As a typically shy, introverted person, this is very outside my comfort zone, and it's actually good for me, because as I've come to realize, a lot of growth happens in the uncomfortable. So this is so I appreciate your time, and thank you for allowing me to share some of the things that I'm gonna be able to share first personally, and with stories I've had through the Special Olympics and other things that hopefully can help inspire some other people to, you know, live their authentic lives and give back a little bit, and kind of, you know, figure some things out that maybe are holding them back from living kind of the life that they consciously want to live. So yeah, backstory. I'll give you kind of a quick rundown of how I came to the conclusion of that I might want to leave kind of Boston and everything. I was in my comfort zone. I grew up in a very privileged, middle class, normal family, great parents. I had no problems with childhood, so that's something I'm very fortunate for and grateful for. And then, went through the normal path, went to college. My father passed away when I was a freshman in college, and that kind of set me into a different bit of a life path because, when you're in college and you're in a fraternity and you got, a bunch of friends and partying, it's pretty easy to look for something in comfort in that. And so I started a kind of an alcohol addiction, we'll call it there. And that brought me down. When you're in your 20s and you're doing it, it's fine. But when it runs into your 30s and on, and it's starting to run your life a little bit, things get a little different. So along with that, I had a couple other things happen. My brother is, same. He was 3 years younger than me. So when he was 16, when my father passed away, and this kind of set him from a normal straight A student into eventually, drugs and other things like that. And he became an adult onset paranoid schizophrenic, which obviously for anyone that's dealt with mental health issues, is a kind of obviously a very serious thing that has a lot of question marks and can bring on a lot of trauma and stuff like that. And so, and then since I didn't really have any of the emotional intelligence and skills to deal with that type of stuff, it set me into kind of farther down using alcohol as a the comfort of choice. And with all that, it's I had a lot of great friends because my parents had always taught me to be nice to everyone and things like that. So I think that's probably what saved me the most in those times. But when you hit your mid-30s, it happens to a lot of people. It's happened to a lot of clients of mine where you have a bit of a midlife crisis. You start questioning things like, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose?
Right.
That type of stuff. And that kind of, I was in the health coaching and personal training field and stuff like that. So I was in my mind giving back in some way, but really what I was doing is I was helping extremely wealthy people get six packs and eat better and, stuff like that, which, it was fine and it paid the bills, but I felt that I probably had like an intuition or kind of an inner calling that I was probably destined for a little bit more than that. And it all kind of changed when I went up to a surf camp called Special Surfers in Maine. And so this is a surf camp it's a free camp for kids with disabilities, special needs, stuff like that, to basically get into surfing. And I had been, surfing had been great in my life. It's a kind of a meditative experience for me where, I'm able to be out in nature and enjoy everything and kind of let go of all the, human constructs and things like that. So I find, if I could help someone else learn how to do it, it'd probably be very beneficial to them. And my mother was a special education teacher growing up. So I always kind of had a soft spot in myself for that community. And I went up to Maine, and I'll never forget. It was, we're kind of running through the instructions and everything, and we get hooked up with someone. There's like 200 kids that come to serve. It's a big event. George Bush has a house right there. He comes out. There's like 300 volunteers. It's a huge thing in Kennebunk. And it was there was a 12-year-old kid named Hunter who had Down syndrome, and him and his mom show up, and I get paired with him. And this guy had like 40 people that come to watch him surf. Like, it was unbelievable. Like, he was all, I'm getting a little nervous. I'm like, I've never taught someone how to surf. I can barely stand up on the board. What's going on? Yeah. And we paddle out, and this kid, I'll tell you. I remember having a conversation with him on the way out. I'm like, what are we gonna do? Should I boogie board? Surfing's pretty hard. Like, I have a lot of friends that tried it. They can't do it. They're pretty athletic. All this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if this kid's gonna be able to do it. And and then we're having conversations. He's like, I only want to take every 10th wave. I was like, all right, well, we might be out here for an hour, and you got like 50 people here to watch you surf. So, but he quickly let me know that he was the boss and that I was taking orders from him, even though I was the instructor. So, and the first wave that came in, this kid just crushed it. And it was like, he told me to get off the board. He didn't want to, he's like, just put me on it. And and seeing people just so pumped for him, and the smile on this kid's face, and like it was like he was just so excited, and it was like, you could tell he just loved being out there, and
Yeah.
it triggered some stuff inside me that started to change things. And like, he probably caught 20 waves that day. At the end of the day, his mom's thanking me. She's like, "Oh my God, this is the best." He's had a lot of trouble in school. He hasn't had much going on. He's had a lot of bad days. And you could just tell that this was something that could be potentially just make his day or year or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I need to be doing this all the time, and, get a little emotional about it.
Let me stop you there for a second for a couple of reasons. One, because you told me beforehand, you get a little, you get a little jumpy and you just start ranting, and you're not ranting, which is great. But I want to give you a second to catch your breath. And two, I want to go all the way back to the beginning just to acknowledge you for putting yourself out there to share with us. I've said many times on this podcast, a lot of people don't believe me anymore because I've been doing it so long. I'm super introverted too. I don't particularly enjoy this and putting myself out there. So I know how difficult it can be, but I also know you and know once you get started that you're this amazing guy, and you're going to share even a lot more with us over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. So thank you. And
Thanks.
That's also right about the time that I met you. So just to put a little context in, that was in 2015, 2016. And
Okay, yeah.
I had been moved back home. I shared with you off air, and I'll say it, this will be a follow-up to the intro, where I said, the rent that I paid you during that time, over that 5-6 months, is the only rent I've paid in the last 6 years, which I just realized the other day. And it's crazy that I've been living as a nomad for that long, but it's because, like you, I was already sort of a little bit ahead of you on that journey. I had the same type of midlife crisis that you had, which is not, I need to go more into the ego and material things. I need to go in the other direction, and I need to find a way to help people and help the world and share the gifts that I have. So I saw that at that time in you. Here's this great guy that I just met. We didn't know each other. We had another roommate that moved out and another one in. We didn't hang out all that much, but when we talked, I could tell that there was a depth to you, and you weren't just this guy that was, a meathead bodybuilder and partier, that there was something else that you had to offer, which is why I encouraged you to do so. And when I heard you talk about the Special Olympics stuff at that time, I could just see you light up. And here I am thinking, here's this big giant surfer guy hanging out in downtown Boston when he's got a chance to go move to Hawaii. And I'm like, to my own peril in terms of a living situation, I'm like, dude, what are you doing here? Get out of here. And so that's the pivot point that now I gave you a little break, and I'm going to hand it back to you now to talk about when you finally did that and said, screw it, I'm going to rent this place that I own, and I'm going to move to Hawaii, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I want to do more of this volunteer work with surfing and special needs kids, right? And that brought you to the Special Olympics. So I'll hand it back to you from there.
All right. Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. And yeah, so I mean that day, I like you just said, I had a little bit of an intuition. I got back to my car. It was like waterworks, like crying for like 15, 20 minutes, just sitting there being like, I got to find a way to make this a regular part of my life. It's like, and like you said, with the ego, I felt like, I didn't realize at the time, and that's kind of one of the illusions of the ego, is it kind of keeps you in the comfortable and keeps you in the normal and keeps you being separate from other people. And I thought that I was giving back in ways that I could, but I realized at that time that there was probably a lot more inside of me that I hadn't discovered yet. And so I, started to plan out kind of the Hawaii thing. I wanted to start a surf camp similar to what I had done in special service, because I didn't have one on Maui. And when I got to Maui, I lightly planned things out, but I wanted to be immersed in the culture before I kind of figured out exactly which way I wanted to go with it. Unfortunately, that exact camp didn't work out due to some semantics with insurance and other things like that. But the Special Olympics was another thing that I got hooked up with when I first got here, and it kind of filled a lot of the things that I was looking at. and also learn from all these guys. And for anyone that doesn't know what the Special Olympics is essentially, anyone with an intellectual disability can come and we practice, play sports. We have area games and we have state games. I personally coach powerlifting, softball, soccer, and bowling. But we have bocce ball and basketball and swimming and track and field and other things like that. And it's just so amazing to see these guys. And I remember going to the first practice. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh man, I think I have 20 kids. What if something goes wrong? And I remember I left that first practice and I was like, oh my. I was like, I felt like I had 20 new best friends, and B, I felt like I'm about to learn a lot of things about life from these guys. So I'm going to start taking some notes. And honestly, that's, a lot of people say to me, thank you for giving back and blah, blah. And what I want to really portray is that I get more than I give from them. So and that's been always the case. The inner feeling of joy and happiness and kind of stuff that comes along with that is something that's it's priceless. And that's what you get, I think.
Hang on one sec, because we lost you there for a second. I just want to make sure that everybody hears. I know what you were trying to say, and I heard enough, but you said that you actually get more than you give, which I think is a really key point that we don't want to just skip over, because it's something that this is why I do this, right? Like, this is not always fun for me. It's not always easy for me. I don't always like people and want to help them, but I do it anyway because there's a benefit not just for them, but for me. And, I talk about all the time, you can go to any type of religion you want to look at, and they all have some piece of this. The one that speaks to me the most is when the Dalai Lama calls it wise selfishness. The more you do for others, the better it is for you. And that's a really good way to be selfish. And this is the type of selfishness in the midst of a crazy world with crazy stuff going on every day, and it seems to be getting worse. This is the type of selfishness we need to encourage each other to have. And the type of selfishness that we need to practice is, what can I do for other people? And also, at the time that I was living at your place, I was consulting for somebody just to make some money so that I could pay rent and do some other things. But, and not really enjoying it, and really struggling to find my way to where I am now, of writing a book and having a podcast and making videos and doing speeches, and not knowing if I would ever get there. And in those dark nights and days when I thought, I don't know if this is ever going to work, the best way I found to get myself out of that headspace was to go do something for somebody else, so that I stopped worrying about what was happening to me and poor me and all that BS that we all deal with. And again, that's ego-driven stuff that keeps us separate. The more that we connect to each other, the more that we realize how connected we are. And that's what this world is missing, is that we are functioning in a way that we're all separate. And I think the pandemic has taught us that we're not. And these recent riots seem to be going in the other direction. I hope they eventually come back to the real people that are out there peacefully protesting to make a statement, because there's a lot we need to fix. But the biggest thing we need to fix is to stop feeling separate from each other, and to realize that we need each other, whether we like it or not. I can't do this without you, right? Like, that's just the way it is. So, sorry, I wanted to make sure that we stopped and made that point, and you can continue in the story or elaborate on that however you want.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, one of the things, it's your passion is for you, your purpose is for others, and I really believe that. It's like, find the things that make you, that you're passionate about, that you feel like you can give back, and once you figure that out and you take care of your own house and in your own mind and stuff like that, and then what you can give back to the world is going to be your purpose. When you're living your authentic path, it's going to be what can you serve? How can you give back to other people? And you're exactly right about a separation, and because I am you, you are me, we're all one. Anyone that doesn't see it that way is part of the problem, not the solution.
I mean, it's really real, and it's so real that it can be now proven by science that, like, we're all made up of stardust, right? That we're all little particles floating through this universe that we don't understand, which means we're all made up of the same thing. they've proven that we're all energy, 99.9999%. And we know that energy connects to energy. So the fact that we're still fighting this battle that we don't feel connected to each other, I think speaks to how powerful the ego is and how serious we all need to fight our own ego and put it in the back seat, which is something that, you know, again, I did years ago. And I said, I'm not going to live like that anymore. I'm going to live now. When I make a decision, I try to stop and think, what's the thing that would help the most people in this situation? Not what's going to serve me best, because what's going to serve me best is helping the most people that I can in that specific instance. That's really what's going to serve me best. So how do I bring my awareness to that? And this could be a good time to segue. I know, and I want to hear about this too. This is a little bit selfish. You went on a trek to Nepal. Was it a few months ago, a year ago? You there? Did we lose you?
Yeah, I was there in January of this year, so I was there for about, and it was
Oh, right before,
it was
right before all hell broke loose, quite literally.
yes, like if I went a month later, I'd have been stuck in India for probably the past 6 months. Which actually I know people that are over there still. But yeah, it was part of kind of my spiritual journey of sorts, you know, and you know, we haven't talked about this yet, but I've actually been working on a book project myself for the past year and a half, and a lot of it is kind of just bringing holistic health awareness to a lot of the families of the Special Olympics, as well as other stuff, and that's kind of been my career journey in terms of, you know, just bringing movement, nutrition, lifestyle stuff, you know, mental health, spirituality, other stuff like that to you know, family members and everyone else. Is not just for them, but it's because I feel like there's a real lack of knowledge of that in our world, because it's a, you know, in the world of supplements and quick fixes and cleanses and diets and things like that, there's just a lot of really, you know, poor information or people trying to sell you something and things like that. So part of that journey to go to Rishikesh was to learn more about meditation and breathwork. And it was also a yoga teacher training, which is, you know, yoga was something that I'd gotten into as part of the spiritual path, and something that resonated a lot with me. Definitely the physical movements, but, you know, in the West, we think of it as exercise, whereas the yogis are like, yeah, that's part of it, but the real part is, you know, breath work and meditation and finding out who you really are. And, you know, go ahead.
I don't know if you know this, but I've been practicing for 23 years, and it certainly started out more as exercise, and as I've continued has been more about controlling my mind and my breath and my body. You know, I want to say a couple things too. One, if you need any help with the book, obviously, I'd love to help you, because I think you're starting this journey on your book similar to the way I did. I wanted to do something, I wanted to help, but I realized along that journey, the only thing I could really do was to try and be my best every day. And that hope that telling that story would help other people do that. And it's working. I mean, yeah, I'd love to see more people be, you know, follow me and be interested, but the people that do really are, it's resonating with them. And I think that your book has that same type of a story that, you know, you're using obviously a different vehicle to tell the story, but you know, it's obviously a similar one in that, look, through these stories, we can all learn how to be our best. If everybody took on the challenge of just trying to be your best one day at a time, and we all really did it, almost all of the problems in the world would go away, and pretty damn fast. So I just want to thank you again for that, and hear more about the book and more about your trip to Nepal, because that's a place I've always wanted to go and have never been, and I hear it's amazing.
Yes, sorry, I had to move outside. I could tell it was breaking up, and hopefully that doesn't affect what we're talking about. But yeah, you know, I went to a place called Sattva in Rishikesh, and it was literally 14 days of meditation, breath work, learning. You know, I'm a lifelong student in this stuff, and I really enjoy the process of trying to gain as much knowledge as I can about it, and trying to pass on what, you know, the gurus and mentors and teachers all I'll present. And it was just an unbelievable, life changing. I had been doing a lot of meditation work and breath work and stuff. And I really think that of all the things in the health and fitness world, that those two are kind of the most important, because that's how you really start to get in touch with your intuition. And when you get in touch with intuition, you can act from your intuition, and your intuition is never wrong. And and as you said, if you're stuck in the ego mind and you're dealing with that negative thinker, you're in a lot of trouble, because if you think that that's what controls your life, and you're acting from a place of fear or doubt or self-limiting beliefs or anything like that, it's a really tough way to go through life, because that's gonna keep you separate from other people. And that's, like you said, that's what we're dealing with now across the world. And so Rich Guest was just a way to kind of get deeper inside myself and find more, not only self-love, but ways that I can love other people better, and show more empathy and compassion. And that's the lifelong battle with the ego. And that's why a lot of the spiritual teachings talk about trying to dissolve the ego and transcend it and things like that, is because, if and for people who don't understand this, and this, in my experience, has been kind of probably the majority of people, is, if you think you're the thoughts of your mind, and people deal with anxiety and stress and things like that, and those which are common, stress is probably the most prevalent thing in our society these days. And, if you start your day and you think, no one in the history of the world has started the day and say, I hope I will have negative thoughts today. That's never been a thing that someone's woken up and said, but a lot of people deal with the negative thoughts and things like that, but if you weren't the one that wanted to have the thoughts, but you still have them all day, then clearly you're not the one thinking it. You're acting on a place of conditioning and programming from the ego mind, and the only way to really dissolve that ego is to find your intuition. And a lot of that happens during being alone, meditation, things like that, where you can kind of reset those neural pathways.
You're hitting on a really good point, which is the first thing to do when things aren't going well is to stop and breathe and listen, right? So I'm going through Deepak Chopra 21 Days of Abundance Meditation Challenge. I'm now on my second time through it because it was so powerful the first time. I waited a week and then just dove right back in. And the recent lesson, the one yesterday, I think it was day 10, was like, how do you make decisions? How do you increase your awareness? And of course, there's a lot of meditation involved, but it's you're asking you the questions and then you write out. And, I thought about it that I've done a pretty good job of getting to a point where when I've asked a question, I try and stop, I try and process it, I try and breathe and listen so that I can hear my intuition, because like you said, that's where the real intelligence comes from, right? We've convinced ourselves that these monkey brains are so fantastic. And guess what? They are. They're amazing computers and can simultaneously run hundreds of apps. They do every day, all day. But what we can do is start to shut off some of those apps and reboot. And when we do that, I learned on my journey, mine was very much a spiritual journey too, as you know, that if I can shut up and listen from my heart as opposed to from my head, I make much better decisions. And again, not much better decisions specifically for me, but for everyone, which makes it better for me.
Exactly.
Can't tell you how many friends that have been, and family that have been so supportive and congratulatory and not envious, but encouraging, I should say, that like, I can't believe you're doing this. The world needs this so much. You got the biggest balls ever because you're actually doing it. And I'm like, well, I got to the point where I realized that none of this is going to be easy anyway. So I might as well do something that I think has value to me and the rest of the world with whatever time I have left. Yep. And again, you're doing that, which I want to be as encouraging to you. It takes incredible courage to be on the journey that you're on, and even more to share it, because I know that you're a shy, insecure person, even though you're this big giant. You're just a big softie. But and that's why when we were texting the other day, I said, look, we need to have this conversation. The world needs people like us. And I'm not patting you and I on the back any more than just to say, you and I, we need to keep going. And I know I have days where I'm like, screw this. People are awful. I don't want to help them anymore. What's the point? Right? And then again, that's sort of more of an ego-based thing. And then you realize, well, I'm connected to all those people. They are me and I am them. They are some different version of me on some different part of the path. I'm not serving myself if I just write them off. And I think to me, this is the most important part. We've become okay in our society by saying, well, if we just write off that group over there, whoever I think that group is, because we all have different opinions about that group, that's the problem. If we just write them off, if we just get rid of them, we'll be fine. That is absolutely 100% not the answer. We cannot do that. We've tried it several times in the history of the world. It's called genocide.
Yeah.
That's the extreme form of that. So
Yeah.
either we find a way forward together or we never find a way forward. That's
Yeah.
what it comes down to, right? And I mean, I would think that in Nepal, you had some pretty good epiphanies about stuff like that.
Certainly, yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it all comes back to, if you can't change yourself first, you're never going to change anything in the world, and that's what I had been dealing with myself. Is I had everything that the outside world told me would bring me happiness and joy. I was, had friends, I was financially successful, whatever it wasn't. I had all that stuff, and I very quickly realized that that was not the answer, because I didn't really have inner peace, and there's nothing more priceless than that, because like you said, when you can attain more of that, you can start to see yourself in everyone, and that's really the key to unlocking the door of happiness. And it's and that's what I think a lot of people don't quite realize, because our entire society construct is set up to create separation, from the beginning, whether it's, some of the problems with the school system and, and kind of our called the government, things like that,
It even shows up in this work, because early on I had some friends that were doing similar stuff, and a couple of them said, well, how are, and I was like, hey, let me know if you need help. I'd love to help you. And I'm like, well, why would you help me? Aren't we competitors? And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no competition in trying to spread positivity and joy in the world. It's one force and one team, and we're all on the same team, right? There's plenty of work to go around, and if you get work that I don't do, I don't give a shit, as long as you're helping people. And that's why, like, when I hear you do this, I'm like, yes, what we need is to start encouraging each other that it's not a competition, right? There's only one team human. And we're all on it, and until we start acting like we're all on the same team, it's never going to work. And we're seeing that over and over and over again. And like you said, it gets to the point where the default is everybody's just pointing fingers at each other. Well, you said this and you did that. When you're doing that, you're not focusing inward on yourself to do your best. Your best and my best is not pointing out other people's flaws. I'm sure we're both pretty decent at it, but it's certainly not the best thing that I can do to bring to the world, right? And so, I mean, anybody like you that's on the same journey as me, that's trying to encourage someone to be their best, stop looking at what other people are doing and just do what you can. This is ultimately the answer that we're all looking for and that we're all writing in the streets about.
Like comparison is the thief of joy is one of my favorite sayings, because it's so true. Like you can't really, you kind of do what you can do. You talked about energy before and how we're all energy. And then, I mean, the field of quantum physics very clearly shows that our hearts have energy fields that extend several feet from our body. So if you're taking care of your own heart, you're getting in the right rhythm and all that type of stuff. I mean, there's an institute called the Heart Math Institute, which goes into the science behind all this stuff, but it very clearly shows that if you're taking care of your own heart, we can change global consciousness, but it starts with taking care of your own stuff, and then you spread that to all the people in your life, and they spread it to others, and it becomes just a wave, and kind of love is like a vibrational boomerang. You throw that thing out there with some speed, it's going to come back hard and fast to you, and and that's what we're all really looking for, when we search for this kind of joy and happiness is, it's going to come from love. No matter what any question is in life, the answer is going to start with love. And there's just no way that isn't the way it is, and it's hard to see sometimes because of the things that we see in the world and, all the injustice and, the systemic problems and things like that, it's like, but you have to take a step back and remember that the people that are doing these things and causing these problems are the people that need our help more than anything, you know?
Yeah, so
And
let me ask you this though. So, and I'm asking, it's the same question I'm asking myself because I'm both curious. So I hear you talk about that stuff. You know, I've been studying this for years now, so I get it. I'm 100% with you. But and we both have friends that are like, that's bullshit. What are you even talking about? Right. So
yeah,
my question is, how do we reach those people and then explain it in a way that they get it and understand it? I think because the heart vibration thing is totally real, but someone may not be ready to have that conversation. Maybe they're more ready to have a conversation. And I struggle with my friends all the time about this because they bitch to me and bitch to me about those other people. And I tell them, stop, I don't want to hear it. What are you doing to be better? That's what I want to hear about. Tell
yeah.
me what you're doing that makes you better and your family better. You got 4 or 5 kids. How are you teaching those kids that hate is gonna bring us all down one day if we don't learn to control it?
Yep. And you know, it's interesting that you asked that because I had struggled with that similar question where, you know, I don't try to preach at people at all or tell them how to live. Like that's the last thing I want to do. Like when I'm coaching, obviously I'm you know, a bit of a health lifestyle coach. I'm going through that process with clients, but you know, I'm not trying to go on the internet and tell random people how to live and, you know, have conversations or, you know, argue with people about that stuff. That doesn't accomplish much. So that's why I go out and try to be the change that I want to see in the world. And that's how I feel like, you know, that's what I can do. But at the same time, that was kind of the reason why I don't want to self-promote this book a ton, but I'm giving all the money back to the Special Olympics. So I feel like it's not really self-promotion. So, you know, so, but anyway.
When you're doing this kind of work, you should get over that and self-promote as much as you
Yeah, I know it's a problem for me. That's the reason why I don't post a lot on social media, and you know, I don't go.
No, but
You know, when I'm
I
talking,
appreciate
I'm
it
not.
because when you do, it's all very positive. And if you look at my Facebook page, I scrubbed anything political out of it years ago. It's all gone. Um, really, when I post, I try to either be positive and encouraging or funny or make people think a little bit without being a jerk and pointing fingers, right? So I, like the other day, I posted you just said one of my favorite quotes from Gandhi, which is be the change you want to see in the world. One of my others and my all-time hero is MLK, and the quote is, returning hate for multiples of hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And this to me is like, it's so simple and it's so right there. How come we can't get it?
Yeah,
How come we
it's
can't do it?
yeah, it's you know, it's like I said, it's a deep systemic problem, unfortunately, and you know, I've spent a lot of time meditating on the recent events that we've gone through, and you know, it's hard because as much as I see myself, you know, as George Floyd, as these other people that have you know, other things like this, you know, it's hard for me to speak from a place of that because I haven't personally experienced it. You know, I grew up as a privileged white kid. You know, it's like I've had all the advantages, you know, that possible, you know, that type of thing. And I even tried to screw it up, you know, in some ways, you know, and I had to come around on it, you know, and and I feel like I've gotten to a good place now, but I can still give back more. And, you know, and so all the people on, you know, obviously we're in a very social media driven world, especially since we've been locked in our houses for, you know, 3-4 months or however long it's been. Maybe it's been a year. I don't even know at this point, but, you know, it's, if you're someone that goes out and you just argue on the internet about politics and X, Y, and Z, and all you do is post stuff and you aren't out doing something, I am probably not going to listen to anything you have to say. Like, you know, it's like, I want to see you go out, show me with your actions. Like, I don't really care.
One of the best ones that you see all the time, because I don't post about that stuff and I don't either, but I try not to unfriend people so I can hear the rhetoric that they're spewing, whether I like it or not. And one of the craziest ones to me is, and a lot of people do this, if you're X, Y, and Z, then you're the problem. Why are you pointing at me about being the problem? What are you doing? Right? And with me and you personally, we both could get on our ego high horse and be like, listen, I've done more charity in the last 2 years than you've done in your entire life. But again, that doesn't help that person, right? So
No, yeah.
engaging in those conversations is ridiculous. And But I do think we should talk. We haven't really talked much yet, but we should talk since it's so crazy to see what's going on. You brought it up. I mean, I made this video recently. You saw it. It's called "Stand Together or Fall Apart," and I think that what has happened in this country, what continues to happen, there are some parts of the police that do have a systemic problem of racism. I know for a fact because I've been to Orange County, California several times, and I know that that police department is not right. You can just tell. I've heard the stories, I've seen some of the stories. I'm not trying to point a finger at them, but I know that it happens in America because I've seen it, right? I'm like you, a little more brown, but generally I'm mostly white and considered white by cops and other people. So I don't know what it's like, but I do have friends who do. And one of mine, recently moved to Spain because he was so fed up and didn't feel safe. And he's a black guy that I went to college with. And, he's been sending me getting messages from him now, as well as I'm getting messages from one of my best friends who's a cop in Boston or in Watertown, but part of the tactical force that goes into Boston when stuff goes down. And so, here I am, and then I'm watching these peaceful protesters that I'm so inspired by alongside these complete assholes or just anarchists looking to raise hell for no reason. And you're looking at all of that, and it's so hard to like pull your head out of it and go, what do I do? What do I say? Where can I help? Where can I make a difference? And given the context of the conversation we're having, I think the answer starts with stopping and breathing and meditating, or at least trying not to think for a little while, and certainly unplugging from the garbage they serve on CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, which only serves to divide us further so that they can make money.
Yeah, I call it fear porn.
Love that.
Their entire agenda is to get you fearful and stressed and all that crap. And not only that, they don't even give good information. It's like, and that's why I think what you're doing is so great, because you're spreading the message of unity and inclusion and compassion and empathy. And I mean, those are all the things that we need more. And like you said, I have the same thing. Like, all my friends are, it's different now that I live here, but like when I was in Boston and growing up and stuff like that, it's like, I had all friends that were kind of just like me, it's like, and a lot of them don't understand some of the struggles that a lot of people have, and a lot of the inequality that goes on in the world. And, and there's kids that can't eat, man. There's like, it's terrible.
It's hard when you've lived in so much privilege, which most of us in America have. And then a lot of people haven't, and they're starting to get fed up with it. And, again, going back to my friend who lives in Barcelona now, I'd mostly just let him talk on the message back and forth and listen, because again, what do I have to say? But he said something that made me realize something really important. My whole message is we can stand together or fall apart. But how can we stand together until we allow Black men in America to actually stand as free, equal men?
Yeah.
We can't. How can we stand together until we realize that, yes, there is a systemic problem of police, but by far the vast majority of police in America are really good people trying to do their best for their communities. We can't stand together until we realize that, and there's just so many things, and people all I hear when I say this, I get pushback all the time from all kinds of friends that are super liberal, super Republican or conservative, and everything in between, of like, well, I can't stand with those people because of X, Y, and Z. All right, but if you start with I can't stand with them, then it's over. How do you find a way to do it? How do you find a way to sit down with that person and go, all right, we got a lot of differences that maybe we can get past some, maybe there's some we can't get past, but we can't write each other off. We have to do this together somehow.
Yeah, and I kind of live my life in a way now where I don't think it's important to like everyone, but you have to love them. You don't have to necessarily agree with everything they have to say. Obviously, but at the end of the day, you have to see their perspective and how they've grown up and their conditioning and their programming, and see them for what consciousness level they're living from at the moment. And then, preach. That's why, preaching at them is probably not the way. But even if they take one little thing away from your conversation, they have a little bit of an aha moment, and and they're like, oh wait, this might, even though this is counter to what I might think currently, this is something that it's worth looking into more for me, or I'm willing to, you saw my point of view, so I'm willing to listen to you more. And I think that's where it's important for all of us, and what you're doing and what I'm trying to do and things like that is like, if you're expanding people's consciousness, they're becoming more aware of how they're living. And when they become more aware of how they're living, they start to see themselves as everyone, and that's why,
I think that's a
I
great
hate to
point.
get into any kind of politics, but since you brought it up for a second, sorry, I lost you for a second.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, with how it is in our country, a lot of people these days spend their time concerned about, politics and things like that. And the unfortunate part we're dealing with right now is we don't really have a government. We have a corporate headquarters, and our corporate headquarters cares about profits over people. It's like, so, and are we going to be able to change that, aware of that, and taking care of your own stuff? And when I say your own stuff, I also mean all the people in your life, because the government will constantly bail out big corporations, but they're not afraid to let you fail. And that's been shown over and over again, And so you have to educate yourself. You have to take the time to practice compassion and empathy within your community. What can you do in your community? How can you go out and help the people that are close to you? How can you help the people that are unfortunate, that don't have the same, fortunate things that you do in your community, And I know that's what you're doing. You go and talk in schools, I've chosen the Special Olympics. It's whatever draws people. There's got to be something that is your individual purpose that you care about, that you can give back in some way. And the less time you spend worrying about who's president or X, Y, and Z, or arguing with your friends on the internet, and you give a little bit of that of your time away to thinking about what you can do to serve, your life is going to be way better. Everyone in your life is going to be way better. You're going to inspire your children to do the same, because they are very good at imitating their elders. They will not listen to anything you have to say, but they will imitate what you do. If you go out and you volunteer your time and you give back, they are going to follow suit. And a lot of this programming that we all run off is formed in the first 7 years of life. We're all in a theta brainwave state where you're kind of just downloading information, and that's a part of the systemic problem is when people grow up in a racist household or a sexist household or whatever it is, it becomes a problem later in their life, because they end up acting from that unconscious state, even though they consciously know that it might be a bad idea. It's like, we need to teach this stuff in schools. We need to educate parents. We need to, that's how the change is going to end up happening down the line in generations. And it all starts with, what can you do yourself, And so I think that's what we're both at the end of the day saying, is you have to give back in some way.
Right. And I think that's the scary part to me, is I see a lot of friends and family who I know to be very good people that spend a lot of their time just screaming at the TV or talking smack on social media because they think they're educating people. And really all they're doing is teaching their kids to do that. And that scares the shit out of me, dude. Because if we have there's big generations coming. These kids are the key to the whole thing, which means we're the key to the whole thing, because we have to teach them how to do it. And you said it before. I talk about it all the time. It's in that video. We're not going to like each other all the time. It's not possible. It's never going to happen. You and I, who are good friends, could be on a trip together and you say something, or I want to get something different to eat. We're going to have issues, right? That's what it's like to deal with other people.
Which is okay.
Yeah. And exactly. And think about the people that you really disagree with. Well, you're certainly not going to like them all the time, but that doesn't mean that you can't love them and have compassion for where they are on their journey. And that's the challenge for all of us, because that's not easy. And I'll share a story that I shared with one group of friends who happens to be on the more conservative side of things. That's putting it lightly. But I preach this to them all the time. Not preach, but I'm always challenging them, because most of these guys have known each other since we were like 5 or 6. And, I challenge them when they talk smack about other people and those idiots over there. And I always tell them that we need to be compassionate. And I had to eat my own words last week when I went to Target, and this woman shamed me for not wearing a mask. Totally out of nowhere, we were having a conversation. I was going in to use the self-service, and she doesn't know anything about me. Totally shamed me, inappropriate. But instead of saying what I wanted to say, which is not something I would repeat on a public podcast, let your imagination go wild. I said, okay, have a nice day. And that's because the reason I share that story is, again, not to pat myself on the back. It's because this is the challenge we all have to deal with every day. We're going to be confronted with situations where we want to lash out physically, verbally, emotionally, however. And we have to learn to take a beat, take a breath, and go, okay, what do I want here? I want this person to be a good person. Are they going to be a good person if I say the things that I'd like to say to them? Probably not. It's not going to help them, encourage them to be nicer. So I said, I'll be the bigger person and I'll be nice, even though you're not being nice. You think you are. And that's another part that's crazy is like, people are judging each other based on misinformation. We don't know what the truth is about coronavirus. We don't know how many cases there are, how many legit deaths there are. We don't know how fast it really spreads, how it really spreads. We have all this information. Some of it's real, a lot of it's not, and we don't know which is which. And yet we still go, well, you're making a bad choice. Well, you don't even know if that's true. So why are you pointing your finger at me? You know?
Yeah, and it's and on that point, it's sad that we kind of have a government that no one really trusts. And that's an issue. So that's why I keep coming back to, you have to smile at people, you have to be nice to people, you have to breathe, you have to take care of your own mind. It's like, all the things, you have to give back. It's all the stuff that you can have control over, because the outside world you're not going to have as much control over, but you can always find a way to have control over your inside world. And if you're living from that ego state of mind, which is, it's a survival mechanism. It was designed to make you anxious or depressed. Like, that is its literal job, is to keep you worrying about survival. When we were running from bears and tigers, it was useful. Now it's not as useful. It's like, so now it's,
well,
now
it's useful to people who want to control you and make a profit from it.
Oh, it's very useful to them, and they're well aware of it. Yeah.
Oh, of course they are. And we allow it. That's why I constantly encouraging people to stop watching news. I don't care what your perspective is. We can discuss it if you want. But whether it's MSNBC or Fox, they're teaching you to hate those other people, and that is destructive to all of us. And I will not participate in it.
Yeah, it's a great way to ruin your mind. Cable television in general is like an easy way to pay for your mind being destroyed on a regular basis. It's terrible. And don't get me wrong, I for the majority of my life, I wasn't necessarily a news watcher, but I had fallen into that trap where, and I think a lot of it stems back to, we aren't really given the skills to know how to do that. And that's kind of what I think we're trying to present to people is, you finding that, you can call it meditation, you call it affirmations, you can call it visualization, you can call it prayer, whatever you want to call it, but you have to go inward to shut down that negative thinking mind.
That's a really good point.
Sorry, I lost
about meditation. I've done some episodes on that, but I'll rehash a little bit of that conversation, because it doesn't have to be this Zen where you're floating in the air and you're connected to the entire universe. It's great if you go that far, and if you get there, there's a lot of spiritual and emotional value of that. When I was a kid, I was meditating without knowing it. I would go outside and shoot baskets for 2-3 hours, and I wouldn't think about anything except getting that ball into the basket. And there are tons of activities like that people can do and already are doing without knowing it. They don't realize they're meditating. And that's what I want to call to their attention, is that you don't have to be Buddha or Deepak Chopra. You can just be you. You can sit there and sew. You can ride a bike. You can go running. There's thousands of things that you can do to shut your brain off. And we all do way too much. I'm guilty of using the TV for that. It's a nice, easy, comfortable way to shut your brain off. But like you said, you're paying to turn your brain into mush.
Yeah. I mean, you're letting other people control your environment and your thinking, and that's the major issue that a lot of us have. So that's why, I personally do it first thing in the morning, because part of my morning routine is if I go and turn my phone on right away, I'm immediately getting dragged into the outside world. Like, what is this person doing? What is social media? Whatever, blah, blah, like all this stuff. And that's just a destructive way to start your day, because you have to take care of your own. And it's yeah, I mean, and everyone in the news and everything else, they're all vying for your attention, and the addiction to being distracted is probably the greatest addiction in our world right now. Is
Yeah.
there's so many ways to get distracted from you living your own authentic life,
Right.
and then
It's
you
an
live from
interesting
you
point.
end up kind of living from other people's conditioning.
We talk about all kinds of addiction. We don't talk about that enough, that the addiction to being distracted, that I don't want to be here, or whatever, because all the addictions come from that, right? Like whether it's alcohol, sex, or whatever, the drugs, whatever you're addicted to is just sort of masking some pain that I'm not comfortable in the moment that I'm in right now. So I need to do something
Yeah.
else and be somewhere else. And TV is the same as that. And it's incredibly powerful. And you talked earlier, I want to come back to that too, because one, I didn't know about your dad or your brother when we lived together. You never shared that with me. So I'm sorry about that, but I'm also thankful that you were comfortable enough to share it with us. And I would like to say that mental health in this country is by far the biggest issue we face. It's why when things don't go well, we see people starting to react and overreact in the ways that we're seeing now, whether it be the pandemic or the killing of an innocent Black person right in front of our eyes. Because most of us are mentally unstable, we react in ways that we wish we could have controlled better when we look back at it. And so I think that this is a huge discussion. I'm glad that you're taking that on as a project, because I think we need a very open discussion in America about who we are as a people, mental health wise. And like you said, we're all going to be told you should take this pill or you should drink that drink. But in reality, you shouldn't do any of those things. You should learn how to meditate in some way and calm your own mind and your own body down naturally. However, that is. We can swimming, again, I've named a bunch of different activities. However, you do that. That was one of the cool things. I watched the Mr. Rogers movie, and they talk about how he's not just a nice person all the time, he's still a human being, but he swam for like an hour every morning. And when you burn off that kind of energy and you sort of just put yourself in that mental blinders to turn your brain off, there's a ton of value in that. And we need
Oh
to be
yeah.
encouraging each other to do more of that. That's why your movement that encompasses physical wellness and how you eat, because all the different things we were talked about, the drugs and the alcohol and the TV and food, those are all poisons that we ingest into our bodies and our energetic field, and they break us down and they make us less than our best. So how do we keep our energetic fields up so that we can serve each other and ourselves, right? That's sort of what your whole thing's about, I think.
100%. And the issue is that stress accumulates in the body. So, it doesn't matter where that stressor is coming from. It could be work. The American Psychological Association talks about the major stressors. Right now, the three major stressors are politics, work, and money. It's like, well, I can tell you a good way to get rid of the one major stressor, politics. Stop worrying about that crap. Or not worrying about it, but don't spend your entire day worrying about it. Figure out ways you can eat better. Figure out ways you can move better. Figure out ways you can.
Maybe it's not too late. Maybe you could make my world a brighter place.
There you have it. That's episode 41 of the Zilosophy podcast. Thanks for tuning in. As I said at the beginning, it's a really sad and really solemn time for our country and our world. I hope we all find a way to learn how to be better people because of it and treat each other with more dignity and respect. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm certainly going to keep trying, and I hope that we all will, and that we will all find out that one day, if we just work on ourselves the best we can, that things will get better. And I'm not saying that to diminish anything that's going on. We should not be judging each other so harshly for the choices that are being made right now. We're all dealing with something very difficult. Some of us incredibly, unspeakably difficult. Others of us, like me, pretty privileged and pretty fortunate, but still not easy by any stretch of the imagination, because I do care a lot about people and about how this works out, and that how we all eventually find a way to stand together. Now, that's why I made that video. Go check it out on YouTube, Stand Together or Fall Apart, on the Zilosophy YouTube channel. Father's Day is coming up. Here's a great book that will help your dad be a better golfer and a better person. And that's it. I don't know what else to say. I hope we're all working on being better parents and children and siblings and friends. And I hope that we find a way forward together. And then until next time, this is the Zilosophy Podcast. I'm Z, and you're welcome.